You already know the answer. Deep down, somewhere between your last paycheck and the moment you checked your bank account this morning, you already know. The wealthy don't get richer because they work harder. You've worked hard your whole life. That's not it. They don't get richer because they're smarter. You've made smart decisions. You raised a family, built a career, kept the lights on through recessions, through job changes, through years that asked more from you than you thought you had. So why does it feel like, no matter what you do, the gap keeps growing? Not shrinking. Growing. And the strange part is nobody really talks about it honestly. Not in a way that actually makes sense. Not in a way that feels real. That's what today is about. Not theory. Not a list of tips. Not someone telling you to invest in yourself. Just the truth. About how wealth actually moves in this country. And why most people over 40 are still playing a game they were never fully taught the rules to. Stay with me. Let me ask you something. When you were in your 20s, did anyone sit you down, a parent, a teacher, a boss, and explain to you how compound interest actually works? Not the textbook definition, not the formula, but what it really means for your life. Probably not. And that's not an accident. There's a reason the wealthiest families in America don't leave financial education to the public school system. They teach it at the dinner table. They talk about assets and returns and cash flow the way other families talk about sports scores and weekend plans. It's embedded, it's cultural, it's generational. And if you didn't grow up in that environment, if nobody handed you that map, you spent decades walking through a city without street signs, working hard, yes, moving forward, yes, but never quite sure if you were heading in the right direction. Here's the first truth about how the wealthy really get richer. It's not just about money, it's about time. But not time the way most people think about it. Most of us were taught to trade time for money. You show up, you put in the hours, you get paid. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's honest work. It's how most of America runs. But that model has a ceiling, and the ceiling is low. Because when you stop showing up, the money stops coming. Your time is the engine, and engines wear out. The wealthy figured out something different a long time ago. They learned how to make time work for them instead of the other way around. Think about it like this. Imagine two people planting trees. The first person plants a tree every year, admires it, and then cuts it down to use the wood. The second person plants a tree and just lets it grow, doesn't touch it. Plants another one next to it, and another. And after 20 years, that second person doesn't just have trees, they have a forest. And that forest produces fruit, shade, timber, value, without that person having to do anything new. That's compound growth. Not as a math concept, as a way of life. And here's what makes it painful for a lot of people watching this right now, especially if you're in your 40s, 50s, or 60s. The earlier you understand this, the more powerful it becomes. And the later you understand it, the more urgent it becomes. Not hopeless, urgent. There's a difference, because the question stops being, how do I grow rich slowly over 50 years, and starts being, how do I make the next 15 to 20 years actually count in a way the first 20 didn't? That's a harder question, but it's the right one. The wealthy don't start over at 45. They recalibrate. They look at what they've already built, the experience, the network, the discipline, and they find ways to attach that to systems that work without them. Most people at your stage of life have more assets than they realize. Not all of them are in a bank account. Some of them are in what you know, in who you know, in what you've survived. But none of that converts into lasting wealth unless you understand the mechanics underneath. And that's what we're going to keep pulling apart today. Because the next layer is even more important. And it's the one nobody warns you about. Say this out loud for a second. I make good money. Maybe you do. Maybe you've made good money for years. Maybe you've had a career that most people would look at and say, yeah, that person did all right. Good salary, steady work. Maybe a bonus here and there. And yet, there's this quiet feeling that follows a lot of people in their 40s and 50s. A feeling that doesn't quite have a name, but sits right there in the chest. Something like, I've earned a lot over the years. Where did it go? Not because you were irresponsible, not because you made catastrophic decisions, but because nobody ever made the distinction clear. Income is not wealth. Let me say that again, because it sounds simple, but it changes everything once it lands. Income is not wealth. Income is what comes in. Wealth is what stays. And in America, we have built an entire culture, an entire economy really, around making sure that what comes in keeps going right back out. Bigger house, newer car, private school, the vacation that you needed because the job that paid for everything else was slowly hollowing you out. None of that is judgment. That's just the water we all swim in. But the wealthy, and I don't mean the flashy wealthy, I mean the quietly, generationally wealthy, they made a decision at some point. Sometimes consciously, sometimes because they were taught to, sometimes just by instinct. They decided that a portion of what came in would never touch their lifestyle. It would go somewhere else. Not to savings exactly. Not to a checking account earning nothing. Somewhere that would work. Somewhere that would compound. Somewhere that, 10 years later, would be unrecognizable compared to what they put in. There's a concept that the wealthy understand deeply, and most working Americans were never taught. The difference between an asset and a liability. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. Simple. Almost too simple. But walk through your own life for a moment and apply that lens to everything you own. Your house. Depending on how you use it, it can be either. Your car. Almost certainly a liability the moment you drove it off the lot. Your retirement account. An asset, yes, but one most people either underfund or touch too early. Your skills, your business, your investments. Assets, if structured right. The wealthy don't just earn more, they own more things that earn for them. That's the gap. Not the income gap. The ownership gap. And here's where it gets uncomfortable for a lot of people in their midlife. Because you look around and you think, okay, I understand this now. But I'm 52. I have a mortgage. I have kids that might still need help. I have parents that might need care. I don't have 25 years to let something compound from zero. And that's a real feeling. That deserves a real answer. The answer isn't to panic, and it isn't to pretend the clock doesn't matter. The answer is to get very, very honest about what you actually have, and what it could become if it stopped sitting still. Most people in their 40s and 50s have assets they're underusing. A home with equity they haven't touched strategically. A 401k they set up years ago and haven't reviewed since. Skills and knowledge that have real market value but have never been monetized beyond a salary. The shift isn't about starting from scratch. It's about looking at what's already there and asking a different question. Not, how much do I make? But, How much do I own that makes money while I sleep? That question changes everything. And the people who figured that out, even at 50, even at 55, are the ones who look back at 70 and feel something most people never feel. Not rich exactly. Something quieter than that. Free. Now let's talk about what that actually looks like in practice. Because own things that make money while you sleep is easy to say. It's harder to know where to start when you're standing in the middle of a life that's already fully built. The first move isn't dramatic. It's a conversation. With yourself, and probably with a number. What is your net worth today? Not your income, not your credit score. Your net worth. What you own minus what you owe. Write it down. A lot of people avoid this number because it feels like a verdict, but it's not a verdict. It's a starting point. The second move is to look at that number and ask, what percentage of this is working? Not sitting. Not depreciating. Actually working, generating income, growing in value, compounding over time. For most people, the honest answer is, not enough of it. And that's the opening. That's where the shift begins. It doesn't require a windfall. It doesn't require starting over. It requires a decision. The same kind of quiet decision the generationally wealthy made, sometimes generations ago. That from this point forward, money that comes in will be divided differently. Some for living, some for working. Even a small percentage, redirected consistently and placed somewhere it can grow, does something remarkable over a decade. Not because of magic, because of math. Compounding doesn't care how old you are when you start. It only cares that you start. The clock matters, but it's not your enemy, not yet. What matters more than the clock is clarity. Knowing what you have, knowing what it's doing, and making a deliberate choice about what you want it to do next. There's a moment in most people's financial lives that nobody talks about. It usually happens somewhere in your 40s, maybe your 50s. You're sitting at a kitchen table, or in a car, or lying awake at 2 in the morning. And you do the math, not the optimistic math, the real math. You add up what you have, subtract what you owe, project forward at whatever rate your accounts have been growing, and you land on a number. And that number is either a relief or a quiet devastation. For a lot of people, it's somewhere in between. Enough to not panic, not enough to feel secure. A number that says, you're going to be okay, probably, as long as nothing goes wrong. And that as long as nothing goes wrong is exactly where the wealthy live differently. Because they don't build systems that survive only when everything goes right. They build systems that are specifically designed for when things go wrong. Let me explain what I mean. The first mechanic is something called asset protection, and it sounds like something only billionaires need. It's not. Asset protection is simply the practice of making sure that what you've built cannot be easily taken from you. Through lawsuits, through medical debt, through a business failure, through the 1,000 different ways that life can reach into your pocket and pull out everything you spent decades putting there. The wealthy use legal structures, trusts, LLCs, holding companies, not to hide money, but to create walls between their personal life and financial risk. If something goes wrong in one area, it doesn't collapse everything else. Most working Americans have no such walls. Everything they own is exposed. Their house, their savings, their retirement, all of it sitting in the open, connected to their name, vulnerable to whatever comes next. That's not a moral failing. Nobody teaches this. It's just one of those things that people on the inside know and people on the outside don't. The second mechanic is tax strategy. Now, before your eyes glaze over, stay with me, because this one is probably costing you more than anything else we'll talk about today. The tax code in America is not designed equally. That's not a political statement. It's just true. And it's been true for a long time. There are parts of the tax code that were written specifically to benefit people who own assets. Businesses, real estate, investments, depreciation, capital gains treatment, deferred compensation, Roth conversions done at the right time, strategies that can legally reduce what you owe the government and keep more of what you've earned inside your own ecosystem. The wealthy don't just earn money and pay taxes on it. They structure how money moves so that as little as possible leaks out in the form of taxes before it has a chance to compound. And here's the thing that stings a little. The person earning a salary, a W-2 employee, which describes most Americans, pays taxes first. Before they invest, before they save, before they do anything. The government gets its cut off the top. What's left is what you work with. The person who owns a business, or structured their income differently, has the ability to run expenses through that business, reduce their taxable income, and invest pre-tax dollars in ways that grow far more efficiently over time. Same gross income, completely different outcome. That's not cheating. That's the system. And the question isn't whether you agree with it. The question is whether you're going to use it. The third mechanic, and this one is subtle but powerful, is what I'd call velocity of money. The wealthy don't let money sit still, ever. Every dollar they have is either working, growing, or being repositioned into something that will work and grow. They understand that idle money is losing money, because inflation is always moving. Time is always moving, and money that isn't moving is falling behind by definition. Now, this doesn't mean reckless investing. The wealthy, the truly wealthy, not the lottery winners who are broke again in 5 years, are actually quite conservative with their core assets. They take calculated risks on the edges. They protect the foundation. They're patient in a way that most people aren't, because they're not desperate. And they're not desperate because the system they built doesn't require them to be. That's the real secret inside the secret. It's not one big move. It's a series of small, intelligent, consistent decisions made over years, often decades, that compound into something that looks, from the outside, like overnight success or inherited luck. It's neither. It's architecture. And the beautiful thing about architecture is that you can start building at any age. The design just changes depending on where you are and how much time you have to work with. Which brings us to something I want to talk about in the next block. That deeper layer is mindset, not motivation, not positivity, not the kind of thing you find on a coffee mug. I mean something more structural than that. The actual way wealthy people think about money at a fundamental level. Most of us were taught to think about money as something you earn and spend, a flow. It comes in, it goes out, and the goal is to make sure more comes in than goes out. That's not wrong, but it's incomplete. The wealthy think about money as something you build with. Every dollar isn't just a unit of consumption. It's a potential brick in a structure that can generate more dollars without you having to trade more time for them. That shift from money as flow to money as material changes every decision. It changes what you buy, what you keep, what you risk, and what you protect. And here's the uncomfortable truth. That shift doesn't require more income. It requires a different lens, one that most people were simply never handed. but you can pick it up, starting right now. Because understanding the mechanics is one thing, but there's a deeper layer underneath all of this, one that has nothing to do with money at all. And it might be the most important part of everything we're covering today. I want to tell you something that might sound strange coming from a video about wealth. The mechanics we talked about in the last block, the tax strategies, the asset protection, the velocity of money. None of it works without something underneath it. Something that isn't in any spreadsheet. Something that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. Call it mindset if you want. But that word has been so overused, so hollowed out by people selling courses and retreats that it barely means anything anymore. So let me describe it differently. There's a way of seeing the world that wealthy people, the quietly, durably wealthy, share. Not arrogance, not entitlement. Something quieter than that. It's a kind of patience that most people in this culture were never taught to have. Think about how we grow up in America. Everything is fast. Everything is now. We want the result before we've done the work. We want the harvest before we've planted the seed. And the entire consumer economy is built to feed that instinct. Because an impatient person is a profitable person. They buy things to feel better right now. They make decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. They react instead of respond. And I'm not saying that's a character flaw. It's conditioning. Decades of it. But the wealthy, at some point somehow, learn to override that conditioning. They learn to delay. Not forever. Not in a way that means living small or denying yourself everything, but in a way that means every major financial decision gets run through a filter that asks one question. Does this make my future stronger? Or does this just make today feel better? That question sounds simple. It's not. Because today is real and the future is abstract. And our brains are not naturally wired to sacrifice what's real for what's abstract. But here's where it gets interesting. The people who build real wealth over time, especially people who start later in life, who come to this understanding in their 40s or 50s, they don't do it through discipline alone. Willpower runs out. Discipline is exhausting. Nobody sustains a financial transformation through gritted teeth and spreadsheets. They do it through something different. They do it through clarity, when you are genuinely clear about what you want, not what you think you should want, not what your neighbor has, not what looks good from the outside, but what you actually want your life to look like in 10 years, in 15 years, when the alarm clock is optional and the choices are yours. When that image is real enough, vivid enough, personal enough, the decisions get easier. Not easy. Easier. Because now there's a reason behind the reason. Now the sacrifice has a face. Now the delayed gratification isn't just financial strategy. It's loyalty to a version of yourself that you actually believe in. And that's the thing about people over 40 that I find genuinely remarkable. You've lived enough to know what actually matters. You've bought the things that were supposed to make you happy and discovered they didn't. Not for long. You've chased the titles and the salaries and the square footage, and you've felt, at least a few times, that quiet letdown that comes when you get what you wanted, and it still isn't enough. That experience, that hard-won, sometimes painful experience, is not a liability. It's a compass. Because now you know what you're not chasing. And that's more valuable than most people realize. The person at 25 is still figuring out what they want. You've already done a lot of that work. You just might not have pointed it at your financial life yet. There's also something else that shifts in people at this stage. The relationship with risk changes. not in the direction most people assume. Most people think that getting older means getting more conservative, more afraid, more cautious. And yes, you protect your core assets differently at 52 than you did at 32. But there's another kind of risk that older people become more willing to take. The risk of being honest. Honest about what they actually have. Honest about what they've been avoiding. Honest about the financial decisions they made on autopilot for 20 years without ever really examining them. That honesty, that willingness to sit down and look at the real numbers without flinching, is one of the most courageous things a person can do. And it's also the starting point for everything that changes. Because you cannot fix what you refuse to see. And you cannot build on a foundation you've never actually inspected. The wealthy aren't just good with money. They're honest with money. They know exactly what they have, what it's doing, and what they want it to do. That clarity isn't natural. It's practiced. It's chosen. Over and over again, even when the numbers are uncomfortable. Especially when the numbers are uncomfortable. Because that discomfort, that moment of looking clearly at where you are and admitting the distance between that and where you want to be, that moment is not a failure. That moment is the beginning. Let's get specific. Because everything we've talked about up to this point, the time, the ownership gap, the mechanics, the mindset, it all has to land somewhere. It has to become something you can actually do. Something you can look at on a Tuesday morning and say, okay, this is the move. So let's talk about real life. Not the life of a hedge fund manager. Not the life of someone who inherited money or sold a company at 35. The life of someone who is somewhere between 40 and 65, has worked hard, has some savings, has some debt, has some regrets, and is trying to figure out if there's still time to do this right. There is, but the approach has to match the moment. The first thing, and this is the most unglamorous piece of advice you'll hear today, is to get a complete, honest picture of where you actually stand. Not a rough idea, not a feeling, a real number. Total assets, total liabilities, net worth, what your retirement accounts are actually projected to produce at 67, what your Social Security estimate looks like, what your monthly expenses are right now, and what they realistically need to be in retirement to maintain your quality of life. Most people have never done this exercise completely. They have a general sense, a ballpark. But the ballpark is not enough when the game starts getting real. Sit down, pull every account, write it all down. Yes, even the ones that make you uncomfortable, especially those. That document, that honest, complete snapshot of your financial life, is the foundation everything else gets built on. Without it, you're making decisions in the dark. The second thing is to look at what your money is currently doing. Not what you hope it's doing, what it's actually doing. If you have a 401k that you set up 15 years ago and haven't reviewed since, there's a reasonable chance it's allocated in a way that made sense then, but doesn't make sense now. Too conservative too early, or too aggressive too late. Fees that are quietly eating into your returns year after year in ways that don't show up obviously, but add up to tens of thousands of dollars over a decade. The wealthy review their investments regularly, not obsessively. That leads to bad decisions driven by market noise. But intentionally, at least once a year, with someone who actually understands what they're looking at. Which brings up the question of advisors. And here, I want to be honest with you, because this is an area where a lot of people get hurt. Not all financial advisors are created equal. Some are genuinely in your corner. Others are selling you products that benefit them more than they benefit you. The distinction matters enormously. The word to know is fiduciary. A fiduciary advisor is legally required to act in your best interest. Not all advisors are fiduciaries. Some work on commission, which means their recommendation and their paycheck are connected in ways that may not align with what's best for your situation. Ask the question directly. Are you a fiduciary? Do you earn commissions on what you recommend to me? A good advisor won't flinch at those questions. A bad one will change the subject. The third thing, and this one surprises people, is to look at your home differently. For most Americans in their 40s and 50s, their home is their largest asset, and it's sitting there doing one thing when it could potentially be doing 2 or 3 things. Home equity lines, strategic downsizing at the right time, rental income from a portion of the property, relocating to a lower cost of living area in retirement, and unlocking significant capital in the process. None of these are right for everyone, but they're worth examining, because the house you live in is not just a home. It's a financial instrument, and treating it only as a home while ignoring its financial potential is leaving something significant on the table. The fourth thing is income diversification. If everything you have coming in depends on one source, one employer, one business, one pension, you are more fragile than you realize. Not because that source is unreliable, necessarily, but because one unexpected event can change everything. The people who navigate the second half of their financial lives most successfully are the ones who built, over time, multiple smaller streams of income that don't all depend on the same thing. Maybe it's dividend income from investments. Maybe it's a small consulting practice built around the expertise they spent 30 years developing. Maybe it's rental income. Maybe it's something they built on the side that grew into something real. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be diversified. Because one stream can dry up. 2 streams make that survivable. 3 streams make it almost irrelevant. And here's something I want you to sit with for a moment. The skills and knowledge you've accumulated over a career, over decades of showing up, solving problems, navigating difficult situations, have real market value beyond the salary someone is currently paying you for them. Most people never monetize their expertise outside of their primary job. The wealthy do. They find ways to package what they know into something that generates income independently of how many hours they personally work. A course, a consulting arrangement, a book, a service business that runs with a small team, something that leverages the knowledge without requiring all of the time. This isn't a fantasy, it's a strategy. And at 45 or 50 or 55, with the depth of experience most people have, it's more achievable than it's ever been, especially in a world where the internet has eliminated most of the traditional barriers to reaching an audience or a client base. The fifth thing, and I'll close this block with this, is to stop waiting for the perfect moment. There isn't one. There never was. The wealthy didn't start when everything was aligned. They started in the middle of mess and uncertainty and competing priorities, just like everyone else. They just started because they understood something that takes most people too long to learn. The cost of waiting is not zero. Every year you delay reviewing your investments, there's a cost. Every year you delay restructuring your tax strategy, there's a cost. Every year you delay building that second income stream, there's a cost. These costs don't send you a bill. They just quietly subtract from the future you could have had. And the future arrives whether you're ready for it or not. The question is whether you'll recognize it when it gets here, or whether you'll be the person who looks back at 70 and thinks, "I understood this at 52. I just waited too long to do anything about it." That gap between understanding and acting is where most financial potential goes to die. Don't let it die there. If you're still here with me, after everything we've walked through together today, I want you to know something. Most people don't make it this far. Not because the content is too hard, but because the truth is uncomfortable. And most people, when they feel that discomfort, find a reason to stop watching, to check their phone, to tell themselves they'll come back to it later. You didn't do that. And that tells me something about you. So before we go into the final stretch of this conversation, I want to ask you something directly. If what we've talked about today has been useful, if something landed, if something shifted, even slightly, consider subscribing to this channel. Not as a favor to me, as a commitment to yourself. Because this is what we do here, every single day. We talk about money the way it should have been explained to you a long time ago. Honestly. Without the noise. Without the hype. Just the real mechanics of how financial lives are built and protected and passed on. There are people watching this right now who are going to do something with what they heard today. And there are people who are going to feel inspired for about 40 minutes and then go back to exactly what they were doing before. The difference between those two people is not intelligence. It's not circumstances. It's not even time. It's whether they keep showing up. So show up, subscribe, come back tomorrow. Now. Let's talk about the thing that connects all of this together. Because we've covered a lot of ground. Time, ownership, mechanics, mindset, real-world steps. And it might feel like separate pieces right now. It isn't. It's one thing. It's the understanding that wealth, real, lasting, generational wealth, is not an event. It's not a windfall. It's not a lucky investment or a perfectly timed market move or a business that explodes overnight. It's a posture. A way of standing in relation to your money, your time, and your future that is fundamentally different from how most Americans were taught to stand. Most of us were taught to earn and spend. The cycle was the point. Work hard, enjoy the rewards. Work harder, enjoy more rewards. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying the rewards of hard work. Nothing at all. But somewhere in that cycle, the building stops. And the wealthy, at some point, through some combination of teaching and experience and honest reflection, stepped out of that cycle. Not completely. Not in a way that meant never spending, never enjoying, never living. But enough to let something accumulate. Enough to let time do the work that no amount of effort can replicate. And here's what that looks like from the inside, once you've made that shift. It's quiet. That's the word nobody uses, but everybody who gets there feels. It's quiet, not boring, not empty. Quiet in the way that financial security actually feels, which is nothing like what the commercials promised. There's no dramatic moment where you arrive and the music swells. It's more like one day you realize you haven't checked your bank account out of anxiety in a long time. You realize you made a decision last month without worrying about whether you could afford it. You realize the background noise that used to run constantly. That low hum of financial stress that becomes so normal you stop noticing it, has gotten quieter. And then one day, Almost without realizing it, it stops. That's what this is all pointing toward. Not a number, not a milestone, not a retirement party. That quiet. And the people who find it, especially the ones who found it later in life, who had to work harder for it because nobody handed them the map. Those people carry something that early wealth rarely produces. Gratitude. A deep, specific, hard-earned gratitude that comes from knowing exactly how different it could have gone. From remembering the 2 in the morning math. From remembering the years when the gap felt like it was growing no matter what they did. They remember. And it makes the quiet even quieter. That's what's available to you. Not guaranteed. Nothing worth having is guaranteed. But available. Within reach. Closer than the noise of daily life makes it feel. The architecture is learnable. The mechanics are accessible. The mindset is buildable. And you, sitting here, having watched this far, having let these ideas actually land somewhere real inside you. You are not starting from zero. You never were. There's something I want to leave you with. Not a strategy. Not a step. Something older than that. At some point in your life. Maybe you remember exactly when. Maybe it's blurry now. You made a decision that changed everything. It wasn't the biggest decision on paper. It probably didn't feel historic in the moment. But looking back, you can trace a line from that one choice to almost everything that followed. A job you took, a city you moved to, a person you said yes to, a door you walked through even though you weren't sure what was on the other side. You made that decision with incomplete information. You made it while afraid. You made it while tired, probably, while carrying other things, while the future was still completely unclear, and it changed your life. Financial transformation works the same way. It doesn't start with having all the answers. It doesn't start when the timing is perfect, or the market is favorable, or the stars align into some configuration that finally makes it feel safe enough to move. It starts with one honest decision: to look clearly at where you are, to stop pretending the gap between where you are and where you want to be doesn't exist, to stop waiting for someone else to hand you the map that nobody handed you when you were younger. The wealthy didn't get richer because they had advantages you didn't. Some of them did. Some of them didn't. But the ones who built something lasting, the ones whose financial lives became something they were proud of rather than something they were managing, they all made that one decision at some point. They decided to take their own financial life seriously. Not obsessively, not fearfully. Seriously. The way you take seriously the things that matter to you. The way you showed up for your career. The way you showed up for your family. The way you've shown up for everything in your life that required you to be present and intentional and willing to do the uncomfortable thing. You already know how to do this. You've done it before, in other areas, in harder circumstances than these. The only question is whether you're willing to do it here. And I think you are. I think that's why you're still watching. I think somewhere underneath everything, underneath the habits and the routines and the financial autopilot that most people live on, there's a part of you that knows the current trajectory isn't the final one, that it can still change, that you can still change it. Not by tomorrow, not with one video, but one honest decision at a time, made consistently, over the months and years that are still ahead of you. There are more of those than you think, and they are worth more than you've been told. If this conversation meant something to you today, If even one idea landed in a place that felt real, share this video with 5 people in your life who need to hear it. Not because it's good content, but because the people around you deserve the same honest conversation you just had with yourself. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Come back. Bring your questions, bring your doubts, bring the parts of your financial life you've been avoiding. We'll look at them together and leave a comment below. Not a reaction, a real comment. Tell me what landed for you today. Tell me what you're going to do differently. And tell me, what do you want us to talk about next? What's the financial question you've been carrying around that nobody has given you a straight answer to? Ask it. I'll be here.